Hey there, berries. Welcome to a new series of Ask Bizzle questions. I don't know if that's actually going to be the title of this series. It's just, what I've got at the moment. I'm sure the title above and the thumbnail is all flashy and super duper amazing. But the gist is a high ELO support player taking lower ELO player questions. If you don't know who I am, I'm Bizzleberry. I've been challenger as a support, AD carry, and a mid laner. Currently sitting around master/grandmaster on a couple of my accounts at the moment, and yeah, people just come and ask me questions in the Discord, and I've now piled it into one channel. So now there's a specific Ask Bizzle questions channel where I've said, just ask me the questions, and then I'll answer them all in a video. And that video being this video, we'll go through and pick out some of the questions that people have been asking. League related, mind you. Definitely only league questions. If you do want to ask me a question as well, discord.gg/bizzleberry. I'll be reopening the channel for another video if you guys like this. So yeah, like the video if you like it, and I'll do more. That's the plan here, okay? We work together here? Okay. So I was asked, why is Zyra one of your favorite picks? I wouldn't necessarily say any champion is particularly my favorite pick, but Zyra is just generally a really versatile champion in terms of solo queue. If you first pick her, then not much actually counters her. Double poke is probably the biggest counter to Zyra. So things like, a Caitlyn and like a Lux would be pretty annoying to play against. But honestly, most people would probably find that kind of composition annoying anyway. And also you got the variations of Electrocute and Arcane Comet. If your team needs AP, she's a solid option. A decent amount of crowd control, decent amount of peel, decent amount of damage. Just kind of like a jack of all trades in terms of like a good balance between damage and crowd control. So yeah. When is Nami a good pick? Now that's a pretty good question actually, because she is probably right now one of the weaker enchanters. I say weaker because she's so decent, but not as like, she doesn't really fit a particular niche compared to say like Lulu, who really prefers to be with a hyper carry because of all of her auto attack speed steroid and single target shield buffing. Nami's more like, I want a bit of crowd control, and I want a bit more crowd control and a decent heal. That's basically the gist of it. You got like a little bit of speed up with the passive, a little slow, difficult to land, small AoE knock up with the Q bubble, and then the wave is a good disengage and an okay engage. But everything is just like kind of okay. She's very good in lane and being a lane bully. So if you're able to like harass someone for free that can't sustain themselves through the lane, something like a Janna, Nami can be a pretty good pick. And she can work okay as well with mages because they changed how her E buff works, the little buff that works on spells now as well as auto attacks. So you can play Nami with lots of different champions, but I wouldn't say she excels in one particular area. So if you want to play Enchanter but you're not sure about the current situation, generally Nami is a decent pick, as long as it's not against hard engage, because you'll have a hard time against that. In what enemy team composition is Soraka a good or bad pick? So when you're picking Soraka, you really want to be looking at being able to harass a short ranged opponents, basically, because the most important thing for Soraka in lane is to land those Qs. The further away that you're throwing those out, the slower the projectile, whereas if you're using them directly on top of yourself, it's basically instant. So if you're playing against like long range champions, say like Caitlyn and another poke support, you're probably almost never going to be able to land your Q properly. Whereas if you're playing something against like a Kaiser or a Vayne, or even some engaged champions as well, I mean, you would have to go a bit more defensive with your runes and with barrier and things, but you land more Qs, which means you get more revitalized buffs, which means you'll be able to self-sustain and harass more often and keep your AD carry up as well, because the heal will be cheaper on the health cost as well if you get that buff. So short-ranged opponents good, long-range opponents bad in terms of when you want to play Soraka. What supports actually teach you the most about the role? Which picks do you think are deepest and have the most subtleties? I don't really understand that questions. Really, I don't think any individual champion would teach you too much more than saying anything else than in the role. I think if you are new to the support role, try and find something familiar. Have a look at my tier list that I do every couple of weeks and see if there's a champion. Say, for example, you play top or jungle or mid or even AD carry. There are some champions there that you can bring into the support role that will give you some champion familiarity to learn the lane easier. I guess you're probably asking for like what easy supports you can play to learn the lane. I think a lot of the support champions honestly are relatively easy to learn. None of them are like crazy mechanically intense apart from Bard and Senna. I think if you want to play support and you just want to dive right in, take something in my tier list that's like tier 1, tier 2. Start from there because it's more than likely going to be viable. Apart from Bard and Senna, just avoid those if you're a new support because you'll be overwhelmed by mechanics and learning the lane at the same time. So yeah. Is Bard good in high elo and low elo or just one of them? Is Bard good in high elo? Yeah, he's like disgusting. If I could, I would one trick Bard personally, just easy LP, honestly. If you're really good mechanically and are good at roaming, Bard is like beautiful. In low elo, it becomes a bit of an individual case-by-case basis. If you are good at roaming and mechanics, then Bard will do well for you. If you're not, then you should probably be playing something a little bit more easier in the laning phase because Bard's ultimate, for example, the huge AoE stasis he does, can affect teammates and enemies, and bad Bards will whiff that ult so many times that they will make their team completely rage quit. So you can be really troll on Bard or you can be amazing on Bard, and mechanics are just obviously on a player-by-player basis, so you'll have to play him a couple of games and see if you're deemed worthy or not, but he is one of the, if not the hardest support to play. What do I think about Jenna, I'm assuming, and Neeko support? So Jenna I've always had high in my tier lists, like tier 1, tier 2 always. I personally don't like playing her because I feel like, yes, you can harass a little bit in lane with the Janna pick, but it's more of reacting for enemies to make their own mistakes basically, which isn't really kind of my playstyle. I'm more aggressive than that, but she's definitely a solid pick if you are a bit more of a passive player. Neeko support, no. I mean, I'm sure there's people that have climbed up to Diamond Plus playing Neeko support. Oh, someone just followed me on Twitch. I shouldn't be having my alerts on, but yeah, I do stream on Twitch. Back to Neeko, yeah. So Neeko, I would not recommend just purely because I think she's a rubbish version of Zyra. But yeah, people climb in one-trick stuff all the time. You'll see like Teemo and yada yada yada. If you're like really obsessed with Neeko, I'm sure you could eventually make it work, but why? Just play something else. You probably end up having more fun anyway. Another question I have is, I've been trying to reach plat. I wanted to find another support that can cheese my way up. Cheese players, eh? Okay. What are some support recommendations for someone in gold trying to get to plat? Especially some supports that can get you some free elos like Swain used to. I don't like this mindset of like, yeah, there are always like occasionally some champions where it is kind of like cheesy ELO where because the enemy isn't used to playing against it, you can get in a win. You could probably argue like the cheesiest things at the moment like that can work if you're maybe duo are like Pantheon and used to be like set support, but that's not really played anymore. But Pantheon, maybe like Galio could cheese out a couple of wins, but really if the only thing that you care about is cheesing in League, then I mean each to their own, but that it will change so harshly for you patch by patch that if that champion gets changed, which usually they do, then it's like it puts you in a really awkward position. From what I can tell from your champion pool, you said you like Nautilus, Pyke and Swain, which are quite engagey type champions. Honestly, I think you should probably just play the Nautilus and Pyke still. Like the only reason why you're probably still gold as opposed to hitting plat anyway is because you're looking for an easy way to climb as opposed to self-improving. If everyone had that one piece of advice where it would be like, if you do this in solo queue, you'll magically climb, it's complete garbage, right? Because that magical piece of information doesn't exist. The game's been out for way too long. You may have would get away with that at like season 1 when nobody knew as much about the game as they already do, but that information isn't there anymore. And honestly, just look to self-improve rather than looking for a cheesy shortcut. Like, You know people in life that take those shortcuts and then most of the time they regret it. I'm sure this is the same case as well. Just look to improve yourself. Stop trying to find a shortcut. Hi Bizzle, can you help us know when to pick champions that complement our AD carry or counter the enemy? I usually know, but I get stumped every now and then and just lock in Bard. I mean, Bard, as we mentioned earlier, is a really good pick anyway, even blind. I'm gonna do a video at some point going through what champions are good and not in different situations. I'm gonna start doing my gameplay sessions that I do for League. I'm going to try my best to incorporate as many champion selections as possible. I used to last year, but the reason why I stopped is because of dodges. Dodges have been getting really bad lately the last 6 months. So what I mean by that is in high elo, particularly if someone does their research on their team, finds out a couple of people are filled, like the jungle's filled for example, or they got like a support top laner, they will just dodge just to say lose 3 LP but then save themselves essentially losing 18. So dodges are more frequent in high elo particularly. So if I spend like 5 minutes like talking about every single champion selection and it's dodge, 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 it really does take a toll on my throat and my brain honestly as well. So yeah, I'll do my best though to incorporate as many champion selections as I can into my gameplays just to help you guys understand why I'm picking champions in certain situations. Sometimes it's obviously, you know, your absolute first pick and there isn't too much to it, but I'll try and give you guys an idea what I'm doing patch by patch. What was the first champion you ever mained? Wow. I recall playing back, I played before even season 1 was a thing, so we're talking about 10 years ago now. I think some of my favorite champions back in the day were like Ashe, Gragas, and Sion. I used to be mid lane main back in the day, and some of Gragas and the Sion were like my favorite. Like Gragas is very similar like how to he's played right now, but Sion was like a completely different champion. AP Sion was like the most hilarious thing in League, and then they completely changed the way he plays. Those are some very good memories that I had. I think there's things like AP Janna that I did as well, and there was also lots of a lot of these champions had massive AP scalings. Like I think Janna had like a 1-to-1 AP ratio, if not more, on her Q, so you would just tornado the entire wave. That gets patched out pretty quickly, unfortunately, but yeah, I've had some good times playing those type of champions. But probably my first support main, I should probably say, is Thresh. I remember having a lot of good games on Thresh and like Tom Kench. Those champions were really fun, actually. I used to play a lot of Brand as well, like champions that I don't really get to play as much these days just because they've been nerfed over time. Or the old OP support champions, I guess. Do you have any recommendations for support to blind pick? Like say your first pick. So right now, I would say if you are first pick in champion selection, you've got a couple of options in your head. You can have a look and see if anyone is hovering champions so that you can work well with. So say for example, your AD carry is hovering a Lucian and you're probably looking to play like a hard engaged champion. If you've got like a Caitlyn, then maybe you're looking more towards something to poke in the lane, like a Lux or a Morgana could be quite nice. So that can give you some sort of champions to like lean towards. I think the thing to take note is that if your first pick and the enemy bot lane have champion knowledge and things like that as well, they'll look to counter you to have an easier lane. That's always going to happen anyway, so just look at champions that you're strong with and that you can kind of link up with your AD carry if they are hovering. But I think the main thing is just look at your own champion pool and how strong they are in the current patch once again by looking at the tier lists that I make and try and choose the best one from those options. Another thing as well is to take in mind, like if you have AP top, AP mid, maybe even like AP jungle, if you have multiple people on your team playing AP, don't play something like Zyra or Lux or Zera for Brand, because you'll just have too much AP on your team and it'll be likely that they build magic resistance against that. So just some food for thought there as well. So lots of things that can happen in champion selection. It's really difficult to make in like one video because of that. But yeah, good question. I like that. Let's see, in general, what are you looking for in the AD carry that makes them good or bad? The best thing for me to have with an AD carry is them understanding cooldowns is probably the biggest thing. So that goes for like supports as well. So say for example you're up against a Blitzcrank and he misses his hook. Well, he's not going to be hooking again for the next 14 seconds, and he's literally just, the only thing he can do is come into melee range and knock you up. So you should be looking to harass during that time, and the AD carry should be looking to help you. I think another thing to factor in is positioning on where the jungler is on the map. Like if the jungler is topside, your jungler is topside, the risk factor of you engaging in the bot lane is extremely risky because if you don't know where the enemy jungler is, because if you do get ganked by the enemy jungler, your jungle isn't going to be helping because they're on top lane, right? So both players understanding where players are on the map and when you can make plays and calls and things like that are pretty good. But I think that while I've been thinking about this while I'm speaking, I think the best thing that AD carry can do is actually help buy a control ward. So many AD carries don't buy control wards that it's really annoying. Control wards help out so much, not just like, it shouldn't just be deemed as a support's job. That 75 gold can prevent you being ganked. It can help your lane get ganked as well. So yeah, AD carries, buy control wards, okay? Any tips, tricks, or advice for when and to where to place wards? So ward placements. You've always got to be like one step ahead. Think about when the neutral objectives are coming up and make sure the areas are warded about a minute before. Then you can potentially, if you can, recall, or what they call is resetting. So you reset and you go back to base and then your ward charges come back in and then you head back to the objective again. So having that pre-vision down, what that does is it gives you the like ward advantage. So the enemy will use all of their trinkets to clear out your wards if they're planning on meeting up to that objective. And then what that would do is you'll still have wards, so you'll be able to then use those wards in order to regain some vision around the objective. That's particularly crucial when you're behind in a game, because you won't have full objective control. You're not going to be able to defend those locations to perfection. So you need to make sure you get the pre-vision down, reset, then come back in, and then you can then put wards around over walls and things like that still, so you guys can still have a potential to steal it, or you know, it give you information if you can even seal it at all. So you can always back off on the objective as well, rather than having your jungler blind checking it and things like that. So the key is always like anticipation of what's going to be happening on the map next. It's the same like if you can get deep wards as well. I think a lot of people misunderstand how wards actually work. Say if you ward the enemy blue buff on your side of the map from bot lane, that's going to tell you that if that buff is up and the enemy jungler is not there, then you need to be thinking, well, if the jungler is not doing his own crucial buff, then where is he? So then he's probably more likely to be on the top side of the map or doing a scuttle in the river. So they will give you some sort of like indication of where the actual enemy jungler is, which is huge information. Even though you can't see the jungler, you can then kind of pinpoint roughly where they are. Not exactly, but you'll get a good idea that way of understanding where the jungler could potentially be on the map. So yeah, that's why wards are so strong. With the introduction of mythic items, all priced far and above what a support has economy for, how do you think the support role would be affected? So this is a Season 11 question, and because Season 11 items are going to be dramatically changed over time, they've already said that some of the stats are going to be crazy on them on the PBE, on release. So I'm not going to talk about Season 11 until next week, because I have information that I can't share at the moment. Hey! What else have we got here? When is it better to pick a damaging mage support? Lux, Zyra, etc. versus an enchanter, more classic support, Nami or Soraka. So when is it better to pick a damaging mage support? So picking a damaging mage support can be useful if your team has no AP on the team. So say if you have like a Zed mid and give me an AD jungler, I can't think of anyone, Urgot jungle, because that's getting buffed in 10.20. So you got Urgot jungle, and you got Zed mid, and you've got Garen top, and you've got your AD playing physical damage like an Ashe. Well, you got no AP on your team, so you really need to then try and facilitate some ability power in your team comp. Otherwise the enemy will just stack armor, and then you're just die. You won't have a chance past like 25-30 minutes. The enemy team will probably take like ninja tabbies across the board. So that's like the main priority case on where you would actually want to go AP. Usually AP mages do well with poke compositions. So say if you're playing with like a Caitlyn or a Varus or something like that, then that will help you a lot in terms of lane harassment and just doing a lot of damage in the lane and giving the enemy bot lane a nightmare. Just bear in mind that the consequence of doing that is that's going to make you more vulnerable potentially to ganks, as generally you'll be pushing in towards the enemy turret more. How would you change Swain to make him an S tier pick? Give him back his movement speed. The movement speed is a huge problem on him. What should a support look out for in terms of helping an AD carry with lane management? So say if your AD carry is dead, you want to try and make it so that when your AD arrives back to the turret, that they have as many minions as possible to get XP and money from. So what that can usually mean is that you might have to tank a wave coming in and like standing near your turret but not so close to the turret that your turret's hitting the minions. That's the ideal. The consequence of doing that though is that the enemy bot lane might try and stop you from doing that. If they look to stop you, then just respect it and back off, because if you die trying to stop that wave from coming in to the turret, then you're just giving the enemy an extra 450 gold, 300 for the killed and 150 for the assist. So yeah, just be careful if you do that. In terms of actual lane management, you're going to have to keep an eye. AD carry really gets the final say on how the wave is managed. So if they're freezing the lane, which basically means keeping the wave closer to their turret as opposed to enemy's turret, and then you need to try your best to encourage the enemy like not to come too close and look to punish. Usually you can do that if you're pretty far ahead in the lane. You can freeze that wave nearer your turret so you're protected from ganks. You don't really need to keep looking for more kills necessarily, because the only way that you can do to throw is by being ganked and giving them kills. So if your AD carry is looking to freeze the wave, just try not to hit the minions and just poke the enemy if possible. When should you ward around objectives? We mentioned that one earlier, about 1 minute beforehand. Should you leave your lane if you're behind in lane? Yeah, I mean, yes, generally anyway, you always need to do wards. Sometimes you're completely pressed under the turret, then you won't be able to move. But yeah, you should always look to get vision on the map, even if it's not too far, if you can't reach too far. If the enemy jungler's fed and the enemy bot lane's fed at the same time, getting wards in general is going to be really difficult. But you got to do what you got to do in terms of preventing to be tower dove at that point. So yeah, you want to try and maybe get somewhere in the lower river warded ideally. Maybe towards, if you're playing like nearer your either the blue buff if you're playing red side, or nearer your own chickens if you're playing blue side, like wards around there so the jungler can't come behind your lane. So you will need to move out a little bit to get some of those ward visions down. I think the most important thing is if you're looking like you're going to get tower dove in the next 10 seconds, just back away from the turret, because you're going to die anyway and you're not really going to gain much from standing next to the turret for the minions. So respecting the enemy jungler when you're really far behind is the most important thing that you can do. I mean, you can, yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing in the entire game, is just respect the enemy jungler, for sure. When playing Bard and falling behind early, I have a really hard time having an impact at the game. For example, I do not trust my AD carry alone when behind, so I won't roam as much, and I've noticed that I can't manage to get decent vision down when the enemy has the upper hand. Any advice, or is this question too general? We kind of brushed on that, didn't we, on the previous question? If you're falling behind and you're having a hard time impacting the game, I think you need to start looking towards more of mid-game fights potentially happening, especially when you're playing a champion like Bard. Your ultimates can be so devastating in those mid-game team fights that you can always potentially turn it around. What I'd say is though, your AD carry can be, there are times when your AD carry can be left alone for about 10 seconds. So if it looks like that the wave is going to be at your turret and they can dive it, you can't leave. So that's when you can't leave. But when that wave is cleared out from under your turret, then you've got like 5 to 10 seconds to quickly like maneuver around the map as best as you can. Don't forget you've got those tunnels. You can use those to get around a bit quicker as well, or get further out of the lane quicker, at least anyway. You can always do back pings on your AD carry while you're doing that as well. Your AD carry might lose 1 CS, but if it means you can get a deeper ward in and will save your life potentially in the near future, then that's going to be more important. So I think there has to be some element of trust there. I think if your AD carry is doing really badly, at that point I would just ditch the AD carry and just look to try and help someone who is looking okay in the laning phase and get them ahead further. Because unfortunately how the AD carry role is generally, if someone falls behind, the odds of them coming back into the game are, like we're talking about, into 30 minutes into the game. The whole entire mid game is swept under them. If their early game is that dreadful, there'll always be an item or two behind, and they won't really add much to team fights and things. And if they're playing something like an Ashe, they can still hurl out an arrow and help in team fights that way. If you are hard in a count... Wait, hold on. If you know you are in a hard counter matchup, say you're a blind pick, how do you proceed in the laning phase? I'm told to stay under tower, but is it really okay to give it up from the get-go? So it depends on the matchup. Honestly, this is a matchup basis. Hopefully that you would have taken a champion where you would have had some options still in the laning phase. You wouldn't have like completely bottlenecked yourself into something so niche that you had no options at all. But generally, if your matchup is bad, then you need to prepare yourselves to be viable for mid-game. So say if you're playing a hard engage, but you're playing against a Janna, what I would look to do is probably look towards mid and get gank mid if possible, as many times as you can, and probably pick up boots, like boots super early, and like mobility boosts maybe, just to get more ganks going on mid lane. You can always impact the game as a support throughout the entire game. It's just like where you choose to support. So if your AD carry is playing like an Ezreal, for example, then, or a Sivir or a champion like that, then that's going to make that job easier in terms of roaming. Say you're playing Enchanter plus a hyper carry like a Vayne, you're definitely going to need to be playing a little bit more passive if you're completely countered in that lane, and just wave management at that point. Lane minion management becomes so important because you'll literally be like trying to scrape every single gold from every single minion for your AD carry. I think another one is important is to work out what actual support item you want to start off with as well. Like, do you want the Relic Shield or do you want the Spell Thief's equivalent? If you're playing like a harassing Enchanter, but you know you're not going to be able to harass, you might as well take Relic Shield and just play a little bit more passive, and it will make the enemy generally make more mistakes in lane trying to harass you, particularly if you're playing passive. But like always try and like give your team avenues to help you out as well, like control wards still, make sure you pick those up so your jungler can come down if needed. So you got lots of different tools in your hand. You don't have to like stay in the bot lane. You don't have to look to win every single bot lane matchup. Just understand what your win conditions are and just work backwards from there. So understand how you're going to win the game, who's going to like do well when, and just work backwards on how you're going to achieve that goal. So yeah. Another question here. Hey Bizzle, I just wanted to know your input in runes regarding Senna. Glacial Augment. Like literal Glacial Augment. Like don't do anything else. Like Glacial Augment, yeah. Just do Glacial Augment. Precision secondaries. Have a look at my Senna support guide, which if you'll find it. Just type Senna support in YouTube and you'll find me. Just use that. Alright, just don't do anything else. Coming from someone who enjoys both playing support and AD carry, I often hear that bot lane is dictated by the supports. How much do you agree or disagree with that statement? Generally speaking, how much influence over the lane does the support have versus the carry? I understand this might be a matchup champion specific, so maybe you could elaborate if that's the case. That is like, I could spend talking about that for 2 hours. The quick down low on that is, if your AD carry isn't being aggressive, then as a support, you can't be aggressive. It just won't work. And vice versa. Like if your support is looking to play passive, it's just not going to work. It's always safer to be passive than one of you going aggro, getting caught in a 1v2 in the lane, and then you trying to salvage it from that. So if both of you are looking to be aggressive from the early, then you both need to be aggressive throughout the entire laning phase while respecting the enemy jungler. If you're playing support and your AD carry has shown no signs of aggressiveness and just looking to farm, then your best bet is, in terms of if you want to be aggressive still, is to look elsewhere on the map. I'm not saying could completely ditch your AD carry and just like roam forever, but try and find those avenues to roam a little bit more often, as your AD carry will probably generally be higher on resources anyway to fend off for themselves and protect themselves. And yeah, you're not going to probably get that aggressiveness from them. So yeah, that's the best bit. You just try and get that feeling in the lane quite early on between the interactions of how you're receiving poke from the enemy and how you're punishing the enemy. Which little legend makes the best sounds? Oh, Chonk. Right, that's not really League, but yeah, Chonk's the best. Hashtag Chonk. Are you excited about the new champ, Seraphine? Marina's just had Samira yet, and I've only seen her in one game, and I've seen that she got massively nerfed already. I don't know if Seraphine's going to be a support. Don't ask, I literally have no clue. But am I excited? No. What makes Nami not a great pick at the moment? She's okay. We mentioned this a little bit earlier. She's an okay pick. She's just a jack of all trades. I think if you buffed her too much in one area, then she might be too strong. So I think she's in an okay place in general. I don't think she needs a massive buff. I like a little bit of quality life on the Q for maybe later stages on the game when everyone's got like 1,000 movement speed and landing bubbles become near impossible. That would be great, but apart from that, I don't think Nami needs anything particularly crazy. What supports do well as Samira? I think the general idea for that one is kind of like hard engage. She looks like she could use immobilizing effects to work off her passive, because her passive then knocks up immobilized targets. So something like a Leona, Nautilus, Alistair, Blitzcrank, those kind of champions would probably do the best with Samira. I'm assuming. I have not played with one yet, but that seems to be the gist at the moment. Hi Bizzle. As a support, if your AD carry is not in lane and enemy minions are low, is it okay to last hit instead of letting the ally minions take the kills? Yes. It's okay to take minions if they're gonna die and no one else is to claim. For sure, definitely do that. If it's like, in terms of wave management, if it's like a bigger enemy wave and you've got a tiny little wave and you're looking to freeze it, obviously just don't like wave clear the big wave. Just like poke at them, the ones that are on low health, and get the gold. For sure do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all. Hi Bizzle. Would be great to have some more help about how you choose champions. What perimeters will make the decision? Is there priorities in the process? We mentioned this a tiny bit earlier. I would say that when you're in champion selection and you're wanting to like play the champion selection game, the most important thing going into that is, if you're new at it, work out what works well with your team first, and then look at the enemy team and then try and pick a champion out the ones that you've got in your mind of playing. Which one does the best out of those to impact the enemy team? And if you're not sure at that point, just look at my tier list and choose the one that's higher up. Yeah, so always work with your own team and then look to counter the enemy team. That way you can't really go wrong. Then at least you'll have a decent laning phase or a decent team fight. Like, yeah, so just have a look at your team, try and identify what the win condition is, try and work with your team in regards to that, and then look to pick from out of those champions which one will do the best against the enemy. How do you overcome tilting and helping your team calm down? Okay, so helping your team calm down is, you firstly don't get involved in any of the fights. Secondly, mute. I don't think you'll ever be able to calm down a teammate in 20 minutes. Most of the people that flame in games don't care. So the only thing you can do is not escalate and throw more fire on top of the fire. I guess in this case it would be more wood on top of the fire. Throwing fire on top of fire probably won't really do that much because it's just fire still at that point. What I'm trying to say is, don't make the fire bigger, okay? Don't flame. Just ignore the situation. Like, don't defend anyone. I know that sounds kind of bad, but like literally just don't escalate the situation at all. Just mute them and focus on how you can impact the game still. Yeah, you're not going to resolve any psychological or whatever problems that some people have in your games over in a 20-minute game of solo queue. So just mute and move on. Wow, that ended up being quite a long Q&A session. I hope one or two of those questions that were asked, maybe they were in the back of your mind as well. Hopefully that will lead you in some sort of right direction. If I don't answer a question that you want answering, then hit up the discord.gg/Bizzleberry, get verified, and then find the Ask Bizzle Questions channel. And then when you get in there, leave in your lead question, and who knows, you might be in the next video. But until then, stay very awesome. And yeah, if I'm live as well on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry, feel free to leave a comment there, and I usually reply to as many questions as possible about solo queue and TFT and stuff. So yeah, just come and hang out and come ask me some questions if you got any, and I'll be more than happy to help you. Okay, so don't be shy, and I'll see you soon. Take care.